You wake up, and before your feet even touch the floor, you feel a crushing weight in your chest. The thought of checking your email feels like preparing for a marathon, and the hobbies that used to bring you joy now just feel like more items on a to-do list. Your first instinct is to think, "I'm depressed." It's a logical conclusion. The symptoms look almost identical. The fatigue, the loss of interest, the feeling of being trapped in a gray fog, but there is a silent distinction that thousands of people are missing, and getting it wrong is making the problem worse. If you treat burnout like depression, you're trying to fix a software issue when your hardware is actually melting. One is a state of being, the other is a state of depletion. Today, we're investigating the 8 specific signs that you aren't suffering from a clinical mood disorder, but are actually a victim of chronic systemic burnout. We're going to look at the erosion of efficacy, the physiological cortisol crash, and why the very way you spend your weekends might be the biggest clue to what's really happening inside your brain. Let's investigate. To understand the difference, we have to look at the contextual anchor. Clinical depression is often pervasive. It follows you from the office to the dinner table to your vacation in the mountains. But burnout has a specific origin point. It is a work-related phenomenon that has bled into your personal life. Think of depression as a dark cloud that covers the entire landscape, while burnout is a fire that started in one room of the house and is now filling the rest of the building with smoke. Therefore, the first sign you're burned out rather than depressed is situational relief. When you are away from your primary stressor, whether that's a toxic job, a high-pressure degree, or a demanding caregiving role, do you feel a flicker of your old self returning? If a 3-day weekend or a trip away from your laptop makes you feel even 10% more human, it's likely burnout. Depression doesn't take a vacation. Burnout thrives on the environment you're stuck in. Sign number 2 is cynicism and depersonalization. In clinical depression, the sadness is often directed inward. You feel like you are the problem. But in burnout, the frustration is directed outward. You start to view your colleagues, your clients, or even your industry with a cold, biting cynicism. You aren't just tired, you're resentful. You start to treat people like numbers on a spreadsheet rather than human beings. This is a psychological defense mechanism. Your brain is trying to distance itself from the source of the pain to prevent further emotional overheating. If you find yourself rolling your eyes at things that used to inspire you, you aren't losing your soul. You're losing your capacity to care because your emotional tank is bone dry. This leads us to the third sign, the erosion of efficacy. This is the feeling that no matter how hard you work, you aren't making a difference. In a documentary-style look at the high achiever's brain, we see a feedback loop that has snapped. Usually, work leads to accomplishment, which leads to a hit of dopamine. But for the burned-out individual, the dopamine has vanished. You could win an award or hit a massive milestone, and you feel nothing. You feel like a ghost in the machine, going through the motions, but convinced that your effort is meaningless. Depression makes you feel worthless. Burnout makes you feel useless. There is a subtle but massive difference in how those two feelings drive your behavior. Sign number 4 is the physicality of the wall. While depression often manifests as a heavy, slow-moving lethargy, burnout is characterized by tired but wired energy. Your body is exhausted, but your nervous system is stuck in high gear. You have a resting heart rate that feels like you're constantly mid-sprint. You might experience a tight jaw, chronic tension headaches, or digestive issues that seem to flare up every Sunday night. This is the cortisol spike from chronic stress. Your body has been in fight or flight mode for so long that it has forgotten how to find the rest and digest state. If your fatigue feels like a vibrating wire rather than a heavy blanket, that is a hallmark of systemic burnout. The 5th sign is the weekend recovery trap. Pay close attention to how you spend your time off. A person with depression often struggles to find the motivation to do anything, regardless of the day. But a person with burnout treats the weekend like a frantic hospital visit for their soul. You spend Saturday in a literal coma, unable to move, and Sunday in a state of pre-work dread. You aren't resting, you're just not working. Because the recovery is never deep enough to offset the depletion of the week, you start every Monday with a recovery deficit. You are essentially trying to pay off $1 million debt with a $5 bill every week. Sign number 6 is irritability over sadness. While the media often portrays depression as weeping in a dark room, burnout looks more like snapping at your spouse because they asked what's for dinner. It's a low-grade, constant agitation. Because your cognitive resources are entirely used up by your work or your high-performance facade, you have zero patience left for the minor inconveniences of daily life. Your emotional margin has vanished. You're like a dry forest in mid-July. It only takes one tiny spark to start a massive fire. This brings us to sign number 7, cognitive fragmentation. You start losing your keys, forgetting appointments, and staring at a blank document for 20 minutes without typing a single word. This isn't a memory issue, it's an executive function collapse. Your prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain, is shutting down non-essential services to save power for survival. In depression, your thoughts might be slow and ruminative. In burnout, your thoughts are scattered and thin. You feel like you have 20 tabs open in your brain and the system is about to crash. Finally, sign number 8 is the motivation paradox. If you could quit your job today and move to a quiet cabin in the woods, would you suddenly want to garden, read, and hike? If the answer is yes, you are burned out. A person in the depths of clinical depression often feels that even a perfect environment wouldn't change their internal state. But the burned out person has a vision of escape. You are constantly fantasizing about a life where no one needs anything from you. Your why isn't broken. Your how is just exhausted. But here is why the difference matters so much. The cure for depression often involves internal work, therapy, medication, and changing thought patterns. But the cure for burnout requires external change. You cannot meditate your way out of a 70-hour work week or a toxic boss. You cannot positive think your way out of a physiological cortisol collapse. If you treat burnout as depression, you'll end up blaming yourself for not being resilient enough, which only adds to the guilt and accelerates the fire. The therefore of this entire investigative journey is that we have to stop viewing burnout as a personal failing and start seeing it as a predictable biological response to an unsustainable environment. Your brain isn't broken, it's protesting. It's trying to save you by making the old way of living impossible to continue. If you've realized today that you aren't depressed but are simply empty, there is a strange kind of hope in that. It means you don't need to fix your soul, you need to protect your energy. It starts with the hard no, setting boundaries that feel terrifying but are actually life-saving. It means realizing that doing your best is a variable, not a constant. Some days your best is 100%, and some days your best is just showing up and staying hydrated. The grand payoff of understanding this distinction is the reclamation of your identity. You are not the gray fog. You are not the cynical comments or the scattered thoughts. You are a high-performance system that has been pushed past its limits, and you deserve the same grace you would give to anyone else in your position. If this deep dive into the burned-out mind helped you put a name to the weight you've been carrying, it's time to start the recovery process. You're the kind of person who values the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Subscribe and join a community of people who are learning to navigate the complexities of the modern mind without burning out in the process. I'll see you in the next one.